And thank you very much for joining us on the voice. I'm sorry, I was about to say the voice of Job Seeker. This is Job Seeker Nation with the hashtag this show that we come to you live every week on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a little note in the chat. So I hope that you guys will enjoy today. Jack Kelly is on assignment, almost literally on assignment. And so with me today, I have got Jim Black. He's a certified career and life coach. And of course, he does want to help as many as possible on the job seeker realm. How
Right.
are you, Jim?
I'm doing
How are
very
you
well
doing?
today. Awesome.
Good deal. Good deal. I just had this fear that once upon a time Jack used to have his cat that just happened to jump up in front of the camera and just move across, and it was too funny because his name is Jiggles, and I haven't seen Jiggles in a very long time, so I'm hoping that maybe that Jiggles will be able to appear sometimes. But nevertheless, we are here and we're
All right.
both showing
And
live there on
shout out
LinkedIn.
my
And
cat
you,
on camera too.
yeah. So maybe might, those of you in the chat, you might have your cat on your lap while you're listening to this, and that's quite fine. Say hi to us, give us a shout out, and we hope that we can give you the best information as possible so you can move forward with the job search. We're willing to stop whatever we're talking about to talk about what you want to talk about.
Sure.
Big shout out to Barry who's watching us, saying hi, Barry. I look forward to the topic today as we caught his eye. That's very good. So let's go ahead and get started. Uh, One thing that often comes up in coaching clients, of course, I don't do the personal coaching one-on-one thing anymore. I do more of like a group every summer, which is going to start here in a couple of weeks. And one thing that holds people back in the sense of people hesitate and they're afraid and they kind of hedge their bets on thinking that they're better off not going forward by doing certain aspects of the job search. And perhaps perfection might be one of them. And I know that you recently wrote an article about that. And so give us a little bit of taste of what that article is about and how you see perfection kind of being an obstacle for a job seeker.
Well, I will first admit that I am a recovering perfectionist. I haven't
Hmm.
gotten there completely, but yeah, it's something that I struggle with. Many people are just simply that way.
Hmm.
And it's a double-edged sword, though. I mean, perfectionism can be great. It's going to drive you forward. It's going to drive you to really be successful. It's going to drive you to do your best. It can
Hmm.
also drive you a bit crazy because on the other side, you're not going to reach that level of perfection that you are aiming toward, and therefore it gets a little bit frustrating. And the reality is, it's just not. It's just going to hold you back in the end. It just ends up being more detrimental than it is beneficial. And the fact is also, and I know Harvard Business Report talked about this a couple of years ago. They did a meta
Hmm.
study where they analyzed a lot of data about perfectionism and about workplace performance. They did not find any correlation
Right.
between perfectionism and performance, right? So you can be as perfect as
Hmm.
you want. Job performance in the end isn't really tied to that.
That's interesting. You should say that because I think a lot of people they hedge their bets in large in part because they're unsure of how the work comes out. And I think largely, if you are more creating from scratch than you are some from a template, kind of make a difference as well. In other words, if you have some familiarity with the topic or with an area, you're likely to rely on the template than you would creating something from scratch. More or less, you when you bake from scratch, you're kind of starting from the very beginning, as opposed to if you had a mix, then it's just a matter of following the instructions at least part of the time. You just don't never know. But I think, yeah, people like templates, and they like, even from a metaphor standpoint, people like something that's already laid out, ready to go. They just want to be able to follow the yellow brick road.
It is true, but on the flip side of that, there's always a flip side, right? I mean, that can stifle your creativity. And
Yeah.
companies these days, they want creative thinkers. They want to think out of the box, and that's where you want to show that you can do that. That you're not just following a formula. But there's a lot of I wrote about. There's a lot of problems that are associated with that, and there definitely are solutions as well on how to really deal with this effectively. And the thing is, I've been through all this kind of stuff. This is not just something I've read about. Been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think, people tend to overthink. And I'm one of those overthinkers. I think that might have something to do with perfectionism in the sense that we're thinking, well, maybe I should try this, that, and other, and you're so unsure that I guess I learned that in grad school. I just had to let it ride, and it's going to be what it's going to be since I couldn't uh, justify anymore. And it turned out great that was the time for me to overcome, uh, my perfectionism and whatever things I had to deal with. But I think too that there's some roots in overthinking because we have parents who were perfectionists, that perhaps they had unrealistic expectations of not making a mistake, or were always threatened by you should do this until you have it right, whatever that meant. And sometimes and you may not know what's right, so you don't ever pull the trigger on whatever that is. And I think when people kind of look at their career advancement, they don't advance, they don't move along,
That's
whether it's sideways or upwards, because they have this expectations as what the what ifs kind of get in the way. And I think as well is that too, there are true people who really do come in and underperform, and they allow that instead of taking it, this is time for lesson, they think it's more prohibitive, and saying that maybe I should stop.
Yeah, it really, what I've learned from this is that, one of the main things I've learned is perfectionism slows you down. Um,
Yeah.
and and yeah, think through it. That's fine. Nothing wrong with thinking, but nothing wrong with action too. So, what
Yeah.
I've told people and what I've written about, yeah, think it through. That's fine, but don't only think it through. At least, take a couple small steps, take actions. And I've learned this the hard way. It almost doesn't matter what actions you take, as long as you do something, as long as you move in some direction or another. And the best thing I've found over the years is, action causes other actions to happen. So, and
Mhm.
then you find your way, then you really understand what things are about. You're making connections, you're making things happen. Some things are not going to pan out the way you like. That's fine, but things are going to happen instead of being in that stagnant place where you're just wondering, what can I do that's perfect? Because if that's
Yeah.
the case, you're living in the future and thinking about holding off something that is probably not going to be as bad as you think.
Yeah. Yeah. I really believe, as you were talking, I was thinking of an HR director I was once working with on her career aspirations. And we were just talking back and forth. And she was always in the I don't know phase. I guess, and I can understand a part of that because she's used to having sure steps, and she got to that level because she wasn't. She was almost like a CHRO, which is Chief uh, Resources Officer. She was on that level for where she was, and it was a lot of responsibility. But when it came to herself, she could not generate enough logic within herself to make the next sure steps in her career, and it was really hurting her. And I see how that is. One quote from the article we talk about from Harvard Business Review, because we both read the same article, is that the short answer we found is that perfectionism is a much bigger weakness than job applicants and interviewers presumably assume. So, yeah, I mean, our speculation is one thing, but I think one thing people really find is that their indecision or the lack of their inability to decide really hurts them uh, a whole lot more because they're looking for a sure step. They're looking for something that's already made and already have a template. Barry asks, and thanks for commenting. Barry said, "How can a job seeker have faith in the process when the confidence is low or non-existent, especially when they've been out of work for a while?" Yeah, that is something that's really big. Let's talk about that for a moment because that's a very legit question. It's one of the reasons why we kind of came up with the topic. And I think one of the things that we tend to do as human beings is that our faith does get shaken when we're not chosen. But you should have faith despite that you're chosen, because you should be able to look back at your history, or at least in theory, anyway, you should be able to look back at your theory and successes. And sometimes we don't put our successes and lead with our successes right in front of us so that we can remember these are the things I've accomplished already in my life. And Barry, I'm almost sure you've got some letters behind your name. So I
Mhm.
know that you have achieved some stuff in your life. I don't even have to look at the rest of the profile. I know the things you can go forward with. You're probably asking yourself, is it enough? It probably is. The next question is, do you have a proper perspective on what your prescription is to the employer's job description is? So, can you give those kind of anecdotes and that advice and create strategies around those things going forward? I'll give it a little piece, and then Jim, why don't you go ahead and tackle that for a little bit?
No, you're absolutely right, Mark. I mean, it's we've done so much in our lives, and I talk to people about this, putting resumes together, and they'll put something together and just have a few little things here and there. There's
Mhm.
some amazing stuff that we've done. There's some amazing stuff we accomplished. I think it's human nature to kind of focus on your failings rather than your successes.
Yeah.
And let's flip the script on that, right? Let's just tell people, come in from a position of strength, come in knowing and at least taking an inventory of yourself and your skills, and
Hmm.
say, I've done this. And the more you see of the stuff you've done, you realize, I can do this, and I can take those small steps, and I can just go through the process and relax and don't worry so much about the outcome. Focus on the things you've done, the skills you bring to the table, brand yourself appropriately. But if you can show that, and if you believe in yourself, then yeah, you will move forward and things will happen. As I said before, you shake it up, things will happen. And just remember that you've gone through probably a lot of awful stuff before and came out ahead.
Yeah, yeah. And think of things too that you've done in spite of your weaknesses, things that you were able to forward. Try to think of a way that you can put down in one column what you've accomplished, what your weakness is, and then how did you do it this in spite of your weaknesses. That can actually help renew your strength and the belief that you can do it. I mean, really, when we lack the faith, is something a whole very much elementary to what we tend to rely on. But the one thing that you shouldn't do is put your weaknesses out there first and think that, that these are things that are going to keep me from doing the job. You will put your strengths first and continue to convince, not just convince yourself, but the whole idea is that you've got to show the employer because of these strengths, these are the solutions. And so you should be able to give those kind of in a prescriptive manner. Somebody should say, well, why do you want this job? Well, because I had this experience. These are the things I lend to giving you the solutions. But in order to do that, you've got to dig kind of deep with the company and know as much as you can about the company position for you to really answer that question in a prescriptive manner instead of guessing that my strengths are enough. If you try to go from the well to the cup without having something to bring up the well, you're not going to really meet the need that's at hand. You're not going to be able to get that drink of water. You've got to, you may have to dig deep in that well, but you've got to use something to bring it out. And I think that's one of the things that could really help as well. Jim?
Well, let me tell you the story just briefly, because this reminded me of something. I was speaking
Hmm.
to a man a couple of weeks back, and this comes to that dreaded topic of transferable skills that a lot of people don't realize that they have. But yeah, I was
Hmm.
speaking to a guy. He's about 30 something years old. He's a youth minister. He's been
Hmm.
working for a long, long time with kids, high school, middle school kids. And yeah, he says it's okay, but every year I'm thinking of leaving because I really don't like the job. And every year I think of something that kind of makes me stay. But then he told me, well, I'm not employable. I've only done one thing. I only know this. And then I'm asking him, well, what do you do in the work that you do? And he's telling me how he organizes things. He's telling me how he develops and works with staff. He tells me how
Hmm.
he's planning and events. He tells me how he's doing budgeting and finance. And I said, yeah, look at the individual parts, the skills that you have. Don't just look at the title that you have. And he came
Hmm.
back and said, well, I can go in these different directions if I just, put all these pieces together, exactly what you were saying. And that builds
Yeah.
confidence when you go back and see, yeah, maybe I have a certain job title, but I've done all these pieces inside the job and they can branch off any place.
Yeah. You want to start to have more, try to have more affirmation discussions than you do trying to find out, well, what should I do? In other words, get with people who can really help you affirm what you already know that's valuable. And you may need to ask them, how did, when I did this, how did that make you feel? When I did this, what problem did it really solve? And did it touch anybody else? And perhaps maybe if you repeat it, did they repeat your advice and it worked for someone else? And then you can get a pretty good idea on how that will achieve a lot as far as reaching your ability to communicate to an employer what your value proposition should be in front of you. I also had a recent discussion with a minister, and he teaches on a very high level. I mean, on a master's level. And one of the things that we talked about at the end of the discussion, he said, "You told me some things I already knew, but it was great to have it reaffirmed." And it gave him well, I walked out of the room knowing that he had in his eye this confidence that yes, this is going to happen. I've got to now put in the work to make it happen.
Yes.
And a lot of times we think that work is brick and mortar when really it's a matter of what's going to be at the center of everything that you're going to carry forward, and that is that I have solutions that are well worth my time and their time too. So I think, Barry, I hope that helps some, and we hope that that will help you move forward in your job search. Let's move on a little bit, and we can always come back to these as we think about it. But one of the things I think is really important is uh, as we talk about perfection. I think there is some validations. I think people have the word job stability is thrown around a lot. I think it's also kind of an unrealistic expectation now because one, no job is really stable.
True.
Unless I mean, there's some services that some people do that they've done for years. That's fine, but there's nobody that has something now for 30 years. I always tell the story that my wife did the same job for 31 years on a grant. None of those years were ever guaranteed.
Wow.
And there are times when she's gotten pink slips and then it was rescinded, but she was able to leave though on her terms finally. And I think that's where what people really want. They want, I want a stable job. Well, I don't think there's such a thing anymore. Do you agree with that or do you disagree?
No, I mean, of course, I definitely agree with that. I wrote about this as well. I mean, and I said in the
Hmm.
blog I wrote, I mean, this is not your father's workplace anymore, right?
Right.
Gone are the days where if you didn't stay at a job more than 10 years, then you're a slacker, right? I mean, those
Right.
days where thinking about the corporate ladder and thinking about I'm going to get that golden handshake at the end and I'm just going to keep moving up and then I'm going to just relax and it's all that. No, I mean, that's not the case anymore. And you probably know, Mark, I mean, the average person stays at a job, what, 4 years? Typically these days is what people say, depending on your age. But no, it is not that case anymore. And that's why I tell people, don't let the job dictate things on their terms. Dictate things on your own terms. Make your own path, make your own definition of what you consider success and stability, and redefine yourself, because those days are gone. But a lot of people are holding on to the old paradigm and thinking, if I can just find a job, I'm golden for the next 10 or 20 years and then I can retire. No, you do have to adapt, and there are many ways to do that, and we all have skills that we can use to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think in order to also have the discussion as well, for us to really bring this point and bring it home for a lot of people, let's talk about there's no such thing as loyalty either anymore. And I laugh, I almost laugh out loud even when people say, I want somebody, I really value loyalty. I'm going, well, you know, yeah, that's okay. But out of the same post, especially the employer, they talk about how people are going in and out of jobs and how they had to lay people off. I'm going, and you want loyalty? I
Loyalty,
mean, what the? I mean, to me, loyalty. All that says to me when I see somebody says I value loyalty is that I want to be able to pull the trigger first and not the other person. I think ultimately, that's what all that really means. I think people employers particularly, or somebody who's a manager who says they value loyalty, is that you want to be, so if you do this action first, that means you're loyal, but they do it that they're disloyal. I mean, far as I've ever known it, I've never seen loyalty in one job description ever in my lifetime. Have you?
no, I mean it's not especially these days. I mean it's
Yeah.
not. Thing is, you can't. You in the past you could expect. Now I've been around for a long time. In the past you could expect your employer to quote unquote take care of you and put training time in
Mhm.
and invest in you. So therefore you would in return give them your loyalty and say, yeah, maybe it's an unspoken thing, but I'm going to stick around for a while because you treat me right. I'm going to take care of. We're going to help each other out. But again, that's the old paradigm. If you play by those rules, then you can do as
Mhm.
much as you want. You can work as hard as you want. You can be a perfectionist as much as you want. Still, you may be out the door in who knows how much time, because the company can fold or they may change their operations, and you don't know where you stand. So it is a different world. Loyalty is not the thing to shoot for, and you cannot expect these companies to really look out for your better interests. Sad to say, but in a way, you're kind of on your own. That's why you have to chart your own path, build your own skill set, be agile. That's the word I like to see, agility,
Yes.
and
Yes. And
realize that
creativity.
things
Yeah.
are going to change any given year, any given month. Anything is possible, and just be connected and be agile and learn. And when things happen, you can go into a different direction.
Yeah, and I think it's too the word needs to be reframed because for the most part, and I think it needs to be reframed even more so for older workers who still, kind of hold on to that word and toss that word around like has some relevant meaning to now. And they're saying that employers are looking for that. No, employers aren't looking for. Ideally, they want to be stable, they want to provide some work. But the time frame I had, if you're older, we're thinking 5 years because we go back to the early 2000s. Stay 5 years so you could be vested in a company, and it's like, well, you know, okay, but I think that that paradigm shift has been made, and I think there's companies that are still making it, even knowing how, if you look at their track record, that they've had positions evolve and change and responsibility change because one person left, and then they decide not to fill that position anymore because the room and the budget isn't calling for it. They want something else. then nobody qualifies for that position and is not able to move up, but they got the last person who left responsibility. But it totally needs reframing, and because it encourages young people in the wrong way to stay in a place where they hate, which they're not going to do anymore. Gen Z and millennials, they are not going to stay.
Oh, no.
And really, if I, as an old, if I was an older worker, I wouldn't plan on staying either. But I kind of like riding with the young people, for me, because they are they have reshaped this conversation into something completely different, and they're looking at, as I've said before, they look at not just what we do, they look at what we don't do, and we look at how it makes us feel. And they said, I'm not going down that road. So they said that, well, we're going to do it this way, even if it means if I stayed here less than a year, I stayed here less a year, and now I'm moving on. So I think that's what somebody along the way has made loyalty and job stability this rite of passage that you have to have in order to get the respect that the company wants. And I think that's a conversation that people are not willing to value anymore, as they find out once they get bit. It completely changes their obstacle, their perspective in a way, because they now have been bitten by the truth, not so much it was by revenge. So
Yeah,
I think,
and the truth hurts
sometimes
sometimes.
it takes that.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and I love the idea of multi-generational workplaces. It all sounds pretty good, and it's
Absolutely.
great. I mean, it's nice if you can, as an older adult, get into the mix with some younger folks, learn from them. Don't be intimidated by them, but it's a learning opportunity, and realize they're not going to stick around much, and take some of that mentality with you. And they're looking at skills. They're looking at maybe getting a coding job for like a year or two, then moving on to the next cool place that's doing something that they really want to be doing and some cool project they want to work on. Try to maybe
Mm.
shift your brain a little bit if you're a little bit older and say, I'm going to pick up some skills, and then I'm going to test the waters, maybe in a different direction, and learn
Mhm.
from these younger people. And on the other hand, yeah, these younger workers, they should really, of course, be paying attention to the experience that us older folks have, because we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot of changes and have developed this sense of resilience. And a lot of people don't have that. And I think,
Yeah.
that can get us very far. There's always ageism, there's always bias, but yeah, we bring into the mix, hopefully a desire to help, a desire to learn, and a desire to kind of share that experience, which other people at least should be benefiting from. They may not realize that, but yeah, we all bring stuff to the table, and therefore, you're as valued as at 40 as people are at 20 for the different skill sets you bring. Just how do you market yourself and present yourself and show that there's a knack to that.
I think you bring up a great point, and I think I'll even go back to our talk with Barry about his situation of how he sees that he can maintain the faith. One of the things that Barry can do is be able to show how resilient he's been in his jobs and in his duties throughout that time, and show that to the employer. And when
Mhm.
you try to think of these stories that you need to tell people who's going to refer you, or people that might be interested in your journey, or people who may in a job interview that say, hey, I was able to get through these set of circumstances and accomplish this by doing this.
Right.
I'm a pretty resilient person when it comes to that, and show them how you've been able to do things not because it was easy for you, but sometimes that you did things in spite of circumstances. Just be careful in the way that you position it, and make sure that you're not beating up on old coworkers or old situations, because then you'll be perceived as somebody that's negative about your last workplace. No, you make your object of ire the circumstances that you had to overcome, and then that you learn from that and you took away something more positive than you did negative.
Well, positivity goes a long way. Resilience goes a long way. And these are the tools that you do need to show, and you do need to show that you do have what it takes, and that yeah, and I tell people also, I mean, if you feel like you're kind of maybe missing out compared to some other people have learned or what they're doing, learning should be a
Mhm.
lifelong process, right? You should be staying agile. You should be keeping up on things. You should keep up with your network. You should learn what a lot of people are talking about. You should know the lingo for these jobs that are going on these days. It's a whole new way
Mhm.
of communicating and working with each other. If you can just do a little bit and just kind of take control of your situation, that's how it really works. I remember when I used to teach back in college, an intro to college course, and I used to tell
Mhm.
college students, you're either a victim or you're a creator. You're either a victim of circumstance and you say, well, I can't do this, I have no control, just life is kind of like this, so what can I do about it? And those are the people who tell me that they're stuck all the time and they can't find a way out. Or you can create that path and you can learn the new things and forge yourself forward and take those small steps. Once you take those actions, the confidence comes. Trust me, I know.
Yeah, I'm going to throw you a lob, Jim, in the sense of a question, because I know that you are a career clarity coach, and I think you had this very unique set of skills. What would you say would be two or three things that people can get in order to get that kind of clarity that they need to forge forward? If you could think of just one or two things off the top that you see work every time that helps people gain the clarity and they seem to forge forward immediately afterwards.
The first thing, I mean, it may sound kind of light and fluffy, but yeah, it's a self-awareness thing, right? It's a
That's fair.
self-awareness, knowing, who you really are, what you're really made of, what's important to you in life, what are those skills that you have? Yeah, but what do you value in life? What is your end goal? What do you really accomplish? I mean, a lot of
Hmm.
people honestly don't go through that process. And I went through that when I had some serious health issues years back. It kind of threw me into that self-reflective mind frame. But most
Hmm.
people just say, well, I've done this and I've done this and whatever. What do you want out of life? It's really kind of thinking about what the end goal is and figuring out how you can move forward toward that. And another thing is
Hmm.
like doing an inventory of, again, those transferable skills where you say, well, I've done a lot more than I realized. People don't do that. They don't go back and revise their resume every couple of years or revise their way of doing things. They don't look back at
Hmm.
themselves and see, boy, I've done some amazing things. You do that and you figure out what you really, really want to accomplish. And there you go. That's going to get you really pretty far.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when people have the clarity, it's sort of if you're prescriptive about life, so to speak, you can only, and think in terms of your own health. The doctor is only going to be able to treat what they know is wrong with you to to get a cure. But at the same time, sometimes they're going to give you something to give you to just kind of cure the pain. And uh, and I think a lot of people get stuck there. They don't get clear enough because they said this hurts right now. Just give me something
Oh,
to help the pain, and
oh
I'll
no,
be other. But that's not a great long term plan because it keeps coming up. That
no,
pain keeps
that's right.
occurring, and that's not a way to live. You want to get clear on what the actual diagnosis is so that you can cure the diagnosis. So you can stop getting ibuprofen 800. You can start getting, you can start getting something that's really going to help you get over it for good, or at
Well,
least be able to maintain it for good.
no, well said, Mark. I mean, people want, they want a new job. They hate their boss. They hate where they work. They want a new job. Well, yeah, that's a short-term fix. But are you going to be talking to me a year down the line and say, well, I want a new job because, I'm just kind of doing step by step. Look at the
Right.
bigger picture. What do you want out of life? Not just what do you want out of a job. What do you want
Mm.
out of life? I mean, what is the end goal? What is, and that's why I wanted to do life coach training. It's jobs are great, but jobs should serve your life, not the other way around. So think about
Although,
the end, what you really want to accomplish, and fit your career path into that.
although there's nothing wrong with taking a job to learn something.
Well, absolutely.
If
And
you
you're
do
being
have
stuck.
an end goal, there's nothing wrong, and I think that's where job hopping it becomes really effective these days because they can go learn something
Correct.
and
So,
and also get a little raise for doing it as opposed to staying at the job hoping that they'll teach you something and maybe you'll get a 2% raise instead of a 10% raise. So, I mean, yeah, and there's that dynamic too. And I think we were going to talk about this in another show, how, uh, and I talked about this yesterday with my friend Hannah Morgan, which we had a great show yesterday. And one of the things we talked about was how the boomerang employees, how there's that dynamic too, that where people leave and they've gone and gotten raises, promotions, and all that, only to come back to a job and maybe even the same team. Now there's that new dynamic and saying, oh, this person makes 20% more than when they were in their last position, while the other people who are still there on the team are still 15 to 18% behind because they've gotten one raise during the pandemic. And this
that's
person has made a couple of jumps in the past 2 to 3 years, and they've already advanced their career. They're now bringing something, a whole new value set to the position. Now what? This person has done it, but he's done it with getting paid for it rather than waiting for somebody else. And that's part of taking control of your career
oh,
is not just waiting for
it's very
somebody
true.
else.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
about the stability that we saw before. I mean, people in the older generation, they would think that's kind of crazy. Why would you leave your job in a short time and then go back and then do something else? Because that's a great, like you said, that's a great way to learn skills. If you're doing that for a good reason and you become more employable to your former employer, all the more power
Mhm.
to you.
Yeah.
And these days, employers are fine with that. They're fine
Yeah.
if you are learning new things as you change jobs. Again, it's not your father's workplace. You're not expected to stay more than 10 years. If you are, then you're looked at kind of suspect.
Yeah.
Where's
Yeah.
this
And
ambition?
yeah, there's no settling in. And I think as well is that we talk about older and the younger generation. I don't think any generation gets value out of having to say that, wow, I'm really looking for job stability. And so okay. So does somebody think that thinking to this, should I refer this person or not? Because they're looking for job stability. And unless you reframe it in your mind,
In your mind,
that
yes.
stability, if you reframe it that I'm looking to learn, to have a new experience, to learn something, or even better yet, the best approach is that I have these things to give, and these are the ways that it can play out. And I think that's a great way to share on LinkedIn and say, hey, this is what I learned, this is how I applied it, these were the obstacles, this is how I overcame. If you want to tell stories, and I know people are telling stories in a lot of different ways, and I'm not saying that one story is better than other, except for the better stories that employers are going to look for is that you made it through despite these circumstances and that you're able to achieve these results. These are the results I'm kind of looking for, or saying that this person can do this job because they at least have been through these problems, and even though it will look different on one end, on my end, that that this person can achieve that uh, job in a way that would be great for my team and for my team to get a lot of value out of it.
Well, I mean, as crazy as COVID has been, right, it is an opportunity, right? All change is opportunity. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people are forced into learning how to work from home. They're forced into learning new technology on how to do that,
Hmm.
how to work with teams remotely, how to do file sharing, how to use Dropbox, for example, things like that.
Right.
And you know, and if you can do that, and if you're not afraid, and you can say to people, "Hey, it's on my resume. I've learned this. I'm comfortable with it. I'm learning as I go." Oh, that's going to look really great. You stepped up to the plate, and you can show that, and that makes you more valuable if you take advantage of the crazy changes and the new way of doing things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jim. I appreciate that. Well, let's go ahead to the last topic that we're talking about. Um, we were reading an article about how, basically, I think people get caught up in thinking that they have to work for the same job in the same city, which
Okay.
these days, that you can actually work at home in New Hampshire and work for a company in Paris. And you may not even see your employer or even get to know them intimately, but you do have to have that working relationship via remote. And I'm just wondering if job seekers, and not even just older job seekers, but that people need to now reframe their mind and perhaps broaden their perspective, and knowing that the workplace could be anywhere you work.
It certainly is, and that's where again, and you can make it any place you want. I mean, it's where you want, and even thinking forward to retirement. You know, it's or pre-retirement or
Mhm.
semi-retirement. You know, it's what you want it to be. It's where you want it to be. But the thing is, yeah, you if you wanted to go where you want, there's no harm. And I know you know people that work overseas. There are expats out there. There are a lot of people who come from the U.S. and gone to other places to work. If you can demonstrate again that work from home, those skill sets, that remote working, if you can demonstrate that you know that, my goodness, there are a lot of opportunities out there. Geography should not hold you back, and a lot of people will still kind of look in terms of think in terms of that, but boy, a lot of people, when they have been working from home these days, they love not commuting. They love not having to put up with the other people in their workplace if they don't like them so much. There's a lot of flexibility, and it's a great time to at least think about where you want to be using your skills, where you might want to retire, and just kind of seeing, do you have what it takes, and looking at the options, because my goodness, there are more options really every month because things are different now and people can take control where they want to work besides what they want to do.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And as example, I do this as a freelance writer. I go ahead, I've worked for a company that was out of Germany
See.
at home. And of course, you say, well, that's writing, right? Well, but if you really think about your career in a broader sense, is that well, you can look at you can stop looking at local companies and maybe start focus on what that value you bring might be located in the Netherlands.
Hmm.
Uh, I One of the editors of client that I write for, he lives in Austria. I mean, you think about the bounds there, but I don't think about that when I communicate that. In fact, it was only several months after we started working together that that's where he's from, even though the company is US based. But all that to say is that the workers could be from anywhere. And that kind of should give you an idea what the new workplace is going to look like. You could very well you'll work on integrated teams, not just by race and by culture, but by proximity. And you got to be able to also be have the type of work and emotional intelligence to be relate to where people come from, especially when it comes to time. Understanding that people they're overseas, that their time difference is a lot different than ours. Having to work with someone in Germany, and we had to find different times in the middle of the day. I've interviewed people for my podcast that were from Australia and New Zealand and from Canada and from Spain and other places for years now. And it's just sometimes that's all it is. What time of the afternoon or early morning I need to work. My friend Sunil Ball, who's been on the show before, and she has a podcast and a live stream that she does from Belgium, and she makes it worth getting up in the morning because she has a worldwide audience, not just
Yes.
located here in the US. It's all over the world, literally. So as a result, all these opportunities came to her because that she was, I mean, not just from LinkedIn, but from being on a United Kingdom podcast and being on this German live stream and all of that. So I think when people are just looking at it in a monolithic sense and looking at one tunnel, that they need to broaden the perspective and look at where people are from and say, I'd like to be able to do that to increase my possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we all really just global citizens, right? I mean,
Right.
where are the boundaries? Now, the boundaries are in your head, right? It's only what
Yes.
you whatever limitations you place in your head. Now, those can be
Yes.
broken down. We can't. There is nothing
Hmm.
stopping you from connecting, and this is why LinkedIn is wonderful. I've made some wonderful connections, people all over the world, and they're not thinking in terms of boundaries. Yeah, hopefully they're thinking in terms of not communicating when the other person's asleep. But yeah, but they're thinking of, how can we work? How can we work together? How can we communicate? And there's always little challenges with different countries and communication. But how can we best get along? How can we best help each other? So yeah, to all you
Hmm.
people out there, uh, be active on LinkedIn or the other social media platforms. Connect with people from other places. You just never know who is out there
Yeah.
who might need your help, who might want to talk to you, who might want to share some things with you. Build that network in a global sense because you're not going to find a job that's only 2 miles away probably anymore. So be
Right.
open to the possibilities and be open to connecting all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, and understand too that your virtual, and I've said this several times over the past few weeks on this show, that your virtual connections are real life connections now.
Well, they are.
There's no longer are we separating in real life. I can't wait to meet you in real life so we can further engage in this conversation. That's likely not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen anymore. And I think that's where younger people kind of gotten in where we got off because we're thinking that, oh, I really enjoy this relationship once I shake hands with them, which you may know. Now, I'm not saying I just came back from a conference in Philadelphia last week, and yeah, it's great to have those connections. But really, for me, it was a continuation of those connections now. Not that we had this brand new revelation of work possibilities because I met them. I already met with them and worked with them. And there were times when we've exchanged value on a very high level.
For
So
sure.
therefore, I think that's something else Barry needs to probably just kind of, if he's still listening, let me know, Barry, if you're still out there. If that you can get the faith because you have a lot more options, and you can, and it's up to you to enact on those options that are available to you, and for you to think, instead of thinking your world is at the screen, your access is just at the screen. It is at the screen, but you access billions of people, millions of people with millions of possibilities.
Yeah,
So
and
understanding
if you
that.
really like that personal connection, well, there's something called not working, right? There's something called what about your other
Yeah.
life? If you
Yeah.
really want to be connected with people in the real world, well, do some volunteer work, be active in your community. These are
Yeah.
other things that help you keep the faith. These are other things that build your confidence. Connect with people in the real world and also do that online. That's where you have to put the pieces together and think a little bit differently. But there's always opportunities to connect virtually and in person.
Good deal. Good deal. So we have come to the end of the show, and Jim, I want to give you an opportunity to tell what people should follow you. If you've got an event coming up, maybe you've got an interview, or if you're going to be on Oprah's next Super Soul Sunday, this is a good time to kind of give us a little advertisement of where people can catch you or how people can catch you next.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. I mean, I have to say, now I've been in the career coaching world for quite a number of years, but I'm relatively new to my individual practice. So I'm working
Okay.
on building things. You know, I'm working on making connections like this. I'm working on getting the good word out through LinkedIn. You know, working on work connecting with people. That's
Hmm.
really what this is about. We're both here to serve, right? So I'm just kind
Yeah.
of thinking, how am I going to structure this? How am I going to move forward where I can educate some people, maybe help some
Mhm.
people along the way? But I love to work with, middle and later career people. There are a lot of people I've seen on LinkedIn and other places that are really having a hard time when they're over 40 or 50 and really struggling. So I'm just
Mhm.
working on making these good connections, telling people what I've learned, and we see what happens. I don't have a lot of expectations, but I have a lot of experience in so many different ways, and I've changed careers so many times. And there's just a lot to share, and that's why people need to be active and communicate and be on platforms like LinkedIn. There are many wonderful coaches and many wonderful people who have done so much. You've done a lot of
Mhm.
good for people by sharing the good word. That's all I'm working on for now. And in the meantime, I'll go and play tennis when I have time.
What's your website address, Jim?
What I started is that my private practice is called destinationvocation.com. Destination Vocation.
Okay.
And why I do that is just because I just work with someone in so many people in the past who are they're in jobs because that's what they're in a career, and maybe they started when they were young and just kind of going through the motions and aren't even sure if they
Mhm.
want to be there. So I talk to people and say, what's your calling? What's your vocation? What's the stuff that really makes you feel good about life? What do you want to accomplish? And that's what I'm just trying to reach people like to where I was many years ago, just kind of going through the motions and never really thinking about what I really wanted. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to talk to people and you have to do that reflection. So yeah, I try to connect with people, at least get them to think, get them to communicate, and just get them to be aware, is there a better way that I can live my life and my career and move into retirement? And the answer is always yes. There's always
Yeah.
a better way. Just talk
Yeah.
about it, think about it, communicate with somebody, see what you can do for this world and for society. And there's always good stuff we can do.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I have a bunch of things that are coming up, but probably I'll just focus on one or two. That'll be sufficient. Come back on Friday, where Damien Burkle and I will be on with Nicolette Barrett, where we have a bunch of topics, and that is on the Modern Job Search Checklist, and that's every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, the same time this show is. So feel free to join us at that particular time, as well as I've got, of course, we'll be back here next Wednesday. So see what I mean? That's go in cycles. So we're going to call it the day right here. We thank you very much for joining us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. Jack Kelly will be back with me next week, and we'll see what happens there. Probably it's just him and I hanging out talking about job searching. He's working on tons of articles for Forbes, as you guys know. If you haven't seen him, go on his timeline where you can see he put out a video, or at least a link to a video on Forbes where he's talking about jobs. It's just a short 2 minute video. And I noticed too that Jack, you cut your beard off last week, and I was trying to figure out why it is. And although you had a full beard on the video, I'm going. I meant to ask you, why did you cut the beard off, dude? That was kind of looking
Sure, he
kind
has
of
a good
cool.
reason.
Yeah, yeah. He was looking all Wall Street and stuff. So like the Santa of Wall Street, just with a good beard. But anyway, uh, He knows he's one of the coolest guys on the block. Anyway, peace in the Valley of Love. Thank you very much. This is Job Seeker Nation. You've been following. And Jim, again, thank you very much for joining us here. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Mark.